candle on table 14 had burned down to a stub by the time I admitted he wasn't coming. I remember the exact moment because the waiter, a young man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Anthony, leaned over and asked if I'd like a fresh one. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't bear to watch the wax pool harden on the white linen, a little monument to my own stupidity. Or maybe because saying yes to something small felt easier than admitting the bigger thing I was about to face. I was sitting at Le Beaumont on the Upper East Side in a red silk dress I had bought specifically for that night. The dress had cost me $420 at a boutique on Madison, and I had stood in front of the dressing room mirror with my oncologist's words still ringing in my ears. 1 year clean, you did it. I bought the dress because for the first time in 18 months I felt like a woman again, not a patient. Not a body to be poked and scanned and pumped full of poison. Just a woman who had survived something terrible and wanted to celebrate. The reservation had been made 3 months in advance. I had told my husband about it the same night I got the all clear from Dr. Patel, sitting cross-legged on our bed with my hands shaking from joy. He had kissed my forehead and said, "Of course, baby. Of course we're celebrating. I'll put it in my calendar right now." He had put it in his calendar. I checked. It was still there. My husband's seat across from me stayed empty for 43 minutes before I picked up my phone. The first text I sent was casual. "Hey, are you on your way?" 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared. Then nothing. I waited another 15 minutes and sent another. "Babe?" This time the dots didn't even come. I called him. Voicemail. I called him Eugen. Voicemail. By the third call, I could feel the heat climbing up my throat. That old familiar dread I used to get when I was waiting for biopsy results. Anthony came back to refill my water, and I smiled at him with what I hoped looks like a normal smile, like I was just a woman waiting for her late husband, not a woman whose life was about to crack open in the middle of a Tuesday night dinner. At 8:47 p.m., a text finally came through. 6 words. Got pulled into an investor thing, don't wait up. I read it 3 times. There was no apology, no mention of the date. No mention of the year, the cancer, the candle, the dress, nothing. Just 6 words and the casual brutality of a man who had forgotten that tonight meant something. Or worse, hadn't forgotten at all. I paid for the bottle of wine I hadn't opened, left Anthony a tip larger than the bill, and walked out into the cold November air. My driver was waiting, but I told him I wanted to walk for a few blocks. The truth was, I didn't want to cry in front of him. I got 2 blocks before my phone buzzed. Not a text from my husband. A notification from our mutual photo album, the shared cloud folder that automatically synced any picture taken on either of our phones. A photo had just been uploaded. My husband's account. I opened it. It was a picture of a champagne flute, raised in a toast. Behind it, slightly out of focus, was a marina at night. The lights of the yachts. The unmistakable shape of the Hudson stretching out into black water. And in the reflection of the champagne glass itself, distorted but visible, was the face of a woman laughing. I knew that face. I had hired that face. That face had brought me coffee through 6 rounds of chemotherapy. That face had cried with me in the hospital parking lot when my hair started falling out in clumps. That face belonged to my personal assistant of 2.5 years. I stood on the corner of 73rd and Lexington, and I didn't cry. That's the part people never believe when I tell the story. I didn't cry. I felt something colder than crying. I felt the temperature drop inside my own chest, the way it does in a house when the heat shuts off and you don't notice until your fingertips go numb. I called my brother. He picked up on the second ring. "What's wrong?" I didn't ask how he knew. He just did. He's always been that way. 3 years older than me, the only person in the world who could read the silence in my breathing before I'd said a single word. He was a federal judge in the Eastern District, and his courtroom was 30 blocks south of where I was standing. "I need you to come to the apartment," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "And I need you to bring whoever I'm going to need." There was a pause. Then he said, "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Is it him?" "Yes." "Don't go inside the apartment alone. Go to Mom's. I'll meet you there in 40 minutes. I hung up. I walked another half block before I realized I had been holding my breath the entire time. I let it out in one long shudder, and that was the closest I came to falling apart that night. My mother lived in a pre-war building on Park Avenue in the same apartment she'd lived in for 31 years. She had run a pharmaceutical company for 2 decades before she retired, and her living room still looked like the office of a woman who had once been told she negotiated like a shark. Heavy bookshelves, a leather chair worn down on one armrest where she always rested her elbow, a view of the park that cost more than most people's houses. She opened the door before I even knocked. Mother's no. She didn't ask. She just pulled me inside, put her hands on my shoulders, and looked at my face the way she used to look at my report cards. Carefully. Slowly. Like she was reading something important. "What did he do?" she asked. I told her. The dinner. The text. The photograph. The face in the reflection. I told her about my assistant, the one I'd promoted twice, the one I'd given a Christmas bonus large enough to put a down payment on an apartment, the one who had sat in the chemo chair beside me and held a plastic basin under my chin while I threw up. My mother listened. She didn't interrupt. When I was done, she walked over to the bar cart and poured me a finger of whiskey, even though she knew I rarely drank. "Drink it," she said. I drank it. "Your brother is on his way," she said. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. From this moment forward, you do not speak to your husband. You do not text him. You do not respond to his messages. If he calls, you do not answer. You will not be alone with him. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good. Now I'm going to make a few calls." While she made calls, I sat on her sofa and stared at a framed photograph of myself on the side table. It had been taken at my college graduation 12 years earlier. I was 22, holding a diploma in environmental engineering, grinning like I owned the world. I didn't recognize her. The girl in the photograph looked like a stranger. My brother arrived with 2 other people, a forensic accountant named Mr. Rudin, Halverston, a wiry man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and a woman in a gray suit who introduced herself as my new attorney. Her last name was Bauer-Quincy, and she shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who had been waiting her entire career for a case like this. We sat around my mother's dining room table at 11 o'clock at night. My brother spread out a yellow legal pad and clicked his pen. "Tell us everything," he said. "Start from the beginning." I started from the beginning. I told them how I had met my husband 6 years ago, when my tech startup was still in its second round of funding. He had approached me at an industry mixer, charming and confident, dressed in a suit that turned out later to be borrowed from his cousin. He told me he was in renewable energy consulting. I believed him. I had no reason not to. I told them how we had married after 18 months of dating, how he had been the first man to look at me and see something other than my company valuation, how he had cried at our wedding, real tears, and how I had thought at the time, "This is a man who loves me." I told them about my diagnosis 14 months after the wedding. Stage 2, aggressive. The kind that took my hair and most of my body weight. I told them how he had been there, how he had brought me soup, how he had read me books when I was too tired to read for myself, how I had thought I married the right man. Look at him. Look how he loves me. I told them about the slow drip of inconsistencies, the phone he started bringing into the bathroom with him, the trips that got longer, the investor meetings that went late, the Saturday in August when he forgot my birthday entirely and didn't realize until I made a joke about it 3 days later. I told them about the night I found a charge on our joint card for a hotel I had never stayed in. He told me it was a client dinner. I believed him. Or I told myself I believed him, which is something different. Mr. Halverston wrote everything down. When I finished, he looked up at me over his glasses. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Do you have any reason to believe your husband has had access to your business accounts?" I felt the floor tilt. "He's a signatory on the household accounts," I said. "Not the business. But he was helping me file paperwork during my treatment. He had to help me with a lot of things. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to." Mr. Halverston nodded slowly. "I'd like to start an audit first thing in the morning, with your permission." "You have my permission." "You have my permission." My attorney, Ms. Bauer-Quincy, leaned forward. "There's one more thing we need to discuss tonight," she said. "Before he comes home, before he has any idea what's coming." She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a copy of my prenup. The prenup my mother had insisted on, the one I had signed reluctantly because I felt embarrassed by it at the time, embarrassed that the man I loved had to put his name on a document acknowledging that I had more than he did. He had signed it without complaint. He had told me he didn't care about my money. This document, Miss Bauer Quincy said, is the most important piece of paper in your life right now. It is airtight. He has no claim to your company, your real estate, your investment portfolio, or any inheritance from your family. He is entitled to nothing beyond what was explicitly accumulated jointly during the marriage. And if there's any evidence, any at all, of financial misconduct on his part, the prenup includes a forfeiture clause. What does that mean? It means that if he stole from you, he walks out of this marriage with the clothes on his back. Nothing more. I sat with that for a moment. I had forgotten the forfeiture clause was even in there. My mother had drafted it. Of course she had. My brother put his hand over mine. His hand was warm. I realized mine had gone ice cold. Listen to me, he said. Tomorrow morning, we're going to start moving very quickly and very quietly. You're not going to confront him tonight. You're going to go home. You're going to sleep in the guest room, and you're going to act normal in the morning. Can you do that? I don't know. You can. You can do it because for the next 72 hours, every move you make is going to determine the rest of your life. Do you hear me? I heard him. I went home at 2 a.m. My husband was already in our bed, snoring with his mouth open, the sheets pushed down around his waist. He had not even bothered to shower before climbing into our marriage. His shirt was on the floor. His belt was draped over the chair. I picked up his shirt with 2 fingers and brought it to my nose, and I could smell her on it. The perfume I had bought for her last Christmas because she had admired mine. I dropped the shirt back on the floor. I slept in the guest room. I did not sleep. In the morning, I made coffee. I poured him a cup. I asked him how the investor meeting had gone. He said it had gone late, that he was sorry, that he would make it up to me. I smiled and said I understood. I said, these things happen. I said, maybe we can reschedule dinner this weekend. He said yes, of course, that sounded wonderful. He kissed the top of my head and walked out the door at 9:30. I waited until the elevator dinged in the hallway. Then I called Mr. Halverston. He's gone, I said. Come now. The forensic team arrived within the hour. 6 people with laptops and external drives and a quiet professional energy that reminded me of my own engineers when they were debugging something serious. They took over my home office. They asked me for passwords I had forgotten I knew. They asked me to sign authorizations. I signed everything. By Wednesday afternoon, they had found the first thread. A wire transfer from my company's operating account. $47,000, 8 months ago, while I was in the middle of my 4th round of chemo. The wire had been authorized using my electronic signature. I had no memory of authorizing it. The recipient was a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. By Thursday morning, they had found 4 more. By Friday, the total stood at $3.8 million over the course of 19 months. $3.8 million. Wired in small enough increments to avoid triggering automatic flags. To a network of shell companies, all of which traced back to one man. The man whose name was on the deed of an apartment I had never been to, in a neighborhood I had never visited, where my personal assistant had moved 9 months ago, telling me she had inherited some money from a great-aunt. There had been no great-aunt. I sat in my home office and looked at the spreadsheet Mr. Halverston had printed out, and I thought about all the things $3.8 million could have been. A new wing of the children's hospital where I had been treated, college tuition for the 17 employees who had stuck with my company through the rough years, an entire round of cancer research at the lab where Dr. Patel's husband worked. $3.8 million. The cost of my marriage, calculated in stolen funds. That was the moment I cried. Not at the restaurant. Not when I saw the photograph. Not even when I smelled her perfume on his shirt. I cried sitting in my home office on a Friday morning in November, looking at a spreadsheet of betrayal printed in 12-point font. I called my mother. She told me to come over for lunch. She made grilled cheese because she knew that was what I had eaten as a kid when I was sad. We sat at her kitchen table and I ate grilled cheese and tomato soup, and she didn't say anything. She just sat with me. That's what she does. She is the most powerful woman I know, and she knows when to stop being powerful and just be a mother. By Friday afternoon, my brother had filed the necessary motions to freeze all of my husband's accessible accounts. Not my accounts, his accounts. The ones where he had moved my money. The ones connected to the shell companies. The ones where he had been buying watches and a leased Porsche and a membership at a club in the Hamptons I had never seen the inside of. Miss Bauer Quincy filed for divorce on Monday morning, before my husband had finished his second cup of coffee. He was served at his fake office, the rented WeWork space he had been using to keep up appearances. I am told he did not handle it well. He came home that night and I was not there. I was at my mother's. My brother had arranged for a security team to be in my apartment when he arrived. The team did not let him take anything beyond a duffel bag of clothes. He shouted, he cried, he threatened. He said he was going to ruin me. He said he had done everything for me. He said he had done everything for me. He said I would regret this. My brother had me on speakerphone for part of it, listening from my mother's living room. When my husband shouted, "She'll come crawling back, she always does," my brother muted the call and looked at me and said, "Does she?" "Not this time," I said. The criminal case took longer than the divorce. That's how it goes. The divorce was settled in 11 weeks because the prenup did most of the work. My husband walked out of the marriage with exactly what he had walked into it with, which was a borrowed suit and an inflated sense of his own intelligence. The criminal case was federal. Wire fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, tax evasion, because of course he hadn't reported a dime of the stolen funds. The U.S. Attorney's Office took over after the initial filings. The trial was set for 14 months out. He took a plea deal. They always do when the evidence is this airtight. 7 years in federal prison. He'll be out before he's 50. My former assistant was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. She lost the apartment, of course. She also lost her job, her professional reputation, and a civil suit I filed against her for the bonus money she had used to furnish her new life. The last I heard, she had moved back to the small town in Ohio where she grew up. I do not think about her often anymore. There was a time when I thought about her every day, when I would lie awake at 3 in the morning and remember the way she had held my hand during my port placement surgery. The way she had said, "We're in this together." The way she had meant it, I had thought. I don't think about her now. The memory of her is a closed room in a house I no longer live in. My company went public the following spring. The morning of the IPO, I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange in a navy blue suit. My brother was there. My mother was there. The team that had stuck with me through everything was there. My husband was not. He was in a courtroom in Lower Manhattan, listening to a sentencing memorandum. I did not feel triumphant. That is the thing people get wrong about stories like this. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clean. I felt for the first time in 2 years like the air in my own lungs belonged to me. I started seeing someone eventually. He was the physician who had run my second-line treatment trial. He had a kind, weathered face and the laugh that made you want to laugh with him. We had coffee for almost a year before either of us called it dating. He had been widowed. He knew what survival looked like. He did not flinch when I told him my story. He proposed 2 years later on a Tuesday morning in a coffee shop near the hospital. There was no ring. He said he wanted me to pick out my own ring because I had earned the right to choose my own everything. I said yes. We are not yet married. There is no rush. After what I have been through, I have learned that the only timeline that matters is the one I set for myself. If you are reading this and you are sitting at a table somewhere waiting for someone who is not coming, I want you to know something. The candle on table 14 burned down to a stub, and a young waiter named Anthony lit a fresh one without my asking. That small kindness from a stranger was the first true thing that happened to me that night. There are more strangers than you think who will light a candle for you. There are mothers and brothers and forensic accountants and attorneys who will sit at your dining room table at 11 o'clock at night and ask you, very gently, to start at the beginning. You are allowed to start at the beginning. You are allowed to be furious. You are allowed to be cold. You are allowed to spend 3 months building a case quietly while you make him coffee in the morning, because some endings have to be built with both hands, very carefully, so that nothing breaks except the one thing that needs to break. I learned that November that the woman I had been before my cancer was not coming back. I had spent a year mourning her. I had bought a red silk dress to try to summon her back to life. But she was gone. The woman I became in the months that followed was harder, sharper, more careful with her trust. She is also kinder. That part surprised me. I thought betrayal would make me bitter. Instead, it made me more deliberate about who I let close. I light a candle now, on the anniversary of that night. Not in mourning. In acknowledgement. I light it on my own kitchen counter in the apartment I bought after the divorce, with the windows that face east so I can see the morning. I let it burn down to a stub, the way the one at Le Beaumont did, and I let the wax pool harden. And I remember, the woman in the red silk dress is gone. The woman who lit the next candle is still here. For a long time after the divorce, I sat with one question on repeat, not, why did he do it? That answer came easily enough once Mr. Halverston laid the spreadsheets in front of me. The real question, the one that kept me awake, was this: how had I, a woman who built a company from a folding table in a rented garage, missed the man stealing from me in my own home? The answer, when I finally let myself hear it, was uncomfortable. I had wanted to be loved more than I had wanted to see clearly. During the worst months of my treatment, when my body felt like a stranger's and my hair came out in the shower drain, I needed to believe that the person sleeping next to me was good. So I stopped looking. And he, sensing exactly that, walked through every door I left open. I think now about cause and effect the way an engineer thinks about it. Nothing happens in a vacuum. The hotel charge I explained away in March became the wire transfer I never noticed in May, became the shell company in August, became the photograph in November. Every small deception I forgave was a permission slip he kept in his pocket. He did not steal $3.8 million in one moment. He stole it in 19 months of moments that I chose not to examine. That is the part I want anyone listening to hear. The unraveling of a life does not arrive as a thunderclap. It arrives as a series of small invitations to look away. Each time you accept one, you teach the person across from you what you are willing to lose. I have come to believe that 3 things have to live inside a woman at the same time if she is going to survive what I survived. The first is character. The willingness to be honest with yourself even when honesty costs you the story you were telling about your own marriage. I did not have that for a long time. I am working on it now. The second is judgment. The slow, unglamorous practice of looking at evidence the way it is and not the way you wish it were. Anthony lit a fresh candle for me at table 14 because he saw what I had not yet let myself see. I want to be the kind of person who lights the candle now, for myself, before a stranger has to do it for me. The third is endurance. Not the dramatic kind. The morning kind. Getting up the day after you find the photograph and making coffee and asking your husband how the meeting went, because you understand that some endings have to be built quietly with both hands over many days. I am not a perfect woman. I missed what I should have seen. But I learned, and the woman I am now would not have sat at table 14 for 43 minutes before asking herself the question she was afraid to ask. That, more than any judgment or settlement, is what I carry forward.